This week, Nintendo announced that Kirby and the Amazing Mirror will be headed to their Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack on September 29th. We're gonna dedicate a full episode to not only covering that release, but all the Kirby games that we've missed throughout the run of this series. That's gonna happen next Friday. But first, we're gonna hit 3 Jaleco beat-em-ups that have yet to be covered in the review crew, including the Peacekeepers, Tuff, Nuff, and of course, Brawl Brothers. Sure, those games may have hit Nintendo's service years ago, but the question remains, are any of these games actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, GamePro, Die Hard Game Fan, and more classic magazines to see what the critics said back when these games first came out. So get ready to punch a mutant and eat directly out of a garbage can, because it's time for another eye-gouging episode of Nintendo Switch Online Review Crew. Although it's hard to tell based on the name and the box, Brawl Brothers is actually the sequel to a game that we've previously covered, the so-so beat-em-up Rival Turf. The dark middle chapter of the Rushing Beat trilogy, this brawler came out in 1993 and tried its hardest to ride the success of games like Final Fight and Streets of Rage. The graphics are better, the gameplay is tighter, and the Super NES cartridge even features the full Japanese version, at least through a cheat code. Unfortunately for Jaleco, this was a time of transition, and while gamers may have been into beat-em-ups a year or two earlier, their interest had moved almost entirely to one-on-one fighting games that were inspired by Street Fighter II. Here in America, Brawl Brothers barely made a splash. You see that in the lack of reviews, with most magazines of the era choosing not to cover yet another beat-em-up. I suspect the Nintendo Power spoke for a lot of critics at the time when they complained that there was nothing new in the street fighting genre and was frustrated by the small variety of moves. That said, they did commend the good graphics and cool characters, as well as the 2-player action, so it wasn't all bad. And the truth is, we did see other magazines were not quite ready to give up on the beat-em-up genre. For example, Nintendo Magazine System gave Brawl Brothers an 84%, which is significantly better than the 48% they gave Rival Turf. The same is not true for GamePro, who gave both Rival Turf and the sequel scores of 4 out of 5. While Brawl Brothers is an obvious Final Fight knockoff, it's a good one. If it had a greater variety of enemies, it might well have taken out the current 16-bit beat-em-up champ Streets of Rage 2. Video vigilantes who've polished off other games should bring Brawl Brothers into their family. Look, when it comes right down to it, I actually agree with both Nintendo Power and GamePro. It's true that Brawl Brothers doesn't bring a whole lot of new ideas to the genre. The action is still exciting, and the graphics look great. Give it a play. It's not very long. Only 1 year after the release of Brawl Brothers, we were treated to the epic conclusion to the trilogy, the Peacekeepers. This sequel gives us more characters, more moves, more bad guys, and best of all, more wide open locations to use those moves and beat up those bad guys. This is, in most regards, a better beat-em-up that at least tries to evolve the genre, what with brand new super moves, branching paths, and even multiple endings. But did any of that move the needle for critics who had largely written off the brawler genre by 1994? No, not even a little bit. Electronic Gaming Monthly, for example, sidelined the Peacekeepers with nothing more than a capsule review with scores ranging from Al's 4 all the way up to an 8 from Mike. This is a very long and very good fighting game like Brawl Brothers. Huge levels and non-linear gameplay make this one quite a trip. The 4-on-4 free-for-all is a nice option, but it doesn't come off that well. A good action fighter. EGM ended up giving the game an average score of 6.4 out of 10. Now, when it comes to Nintendo Power, the good news is that they actually liked the Peacekeepers more than Brawl Brothers. Of course, the bad news is that it wasn't by much, going from a score of 2.9 out of 5 to 3. Yeah, barely an improvement. Similarly, GamePro stuck with the same score that they gave both Rival Turf and Brawl Brothers, a straight 4 out of 5. They concluded that the Peacekeepers is a slick piece of work, with good fighting action, sharp graphics, and even Shakespearean dialogue. This cart's a keeper. They also noted that this courageous cart keeps the peace with bust-your-thumb beat-em-up action and unusual eye-catching visuals. Once again, I find myself siding with GamePro. I said, if you're gonna play this game, try to seek out the Japanese version. The American localization is all over the place, going as far as to change the music and even simplify the animation. Look, that's disappointing, but you can still have a whole bunch of fun playing this version of the game on the Nintendo Switch Online. Give it a try. Hey, do you remember how I just complained about Jaleco's crummy localizations? Well, a great example of this is their 1993 fighting game Dead Dance, which was released in the United States under the laughably bad name Tuff Nuff. That's right, it's literally a title where there's not a single word that's spelled correctly because, I don't know, apparently Americans are illiterate or something. Look, maybe this annoys me more than it does others because of my writing and copy editing background. But I'm not gonna lie, it actually took me a while to appreciate what Jaleco is doing with this futuristic fighting game, mostly because of the damn name. Between the story mode and the gameplay, it's clear the developers were heavily influenced by both SNK's Art of Fighting and, of course, Street Fighter II from Capcom. It was also released in 1993, early enough in the fighting game craze where people weren't completely burned out on fireballs and dragon punches. But what did the critics say? Did they like this more than Jaleco's side-scrolling beat-em-ups? Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that pretty much every publication reviewed Tuff Nuff, mostly because it was a fighting game that was released in 1993. That alone is going to get you a lot of attention, as well as more than a few direct comparisons. That was certainly the case when it came to Electronic Gaming Monthly, who mostly liked the game, giving it a 7.5 out of 10. Steve said that Jaleco's getting better and better all the time. Following the surprise hit Brawl Brothers, here's another fighting game more in the vein of Street Fighter II. The different options, such as fighting a wide variety of opponents or one-on-one against a friend, are welcome. A must-have for fighting fans of all ages. Ed also liked it, but gave it a slightly lower score. With the slew of fighting games now coming out, Tuff Nuff ranks pretty high in my book. The moves are nothing really spectacular, but the feel of the game is good. It's another good fighting game that must join the growing ranks of this genre. EGM's score nearly mirrors that of video games and computer entertainment, which gave Tuff Nuff a solid 7.2 out of 10. Nintendo Power, on the other hand, went way lower, giving it a 3.1 out of 5, which is right in line with the other two Jaleco titles that we've covered in this episode. And then there's SNES Force, who gave it an average score of 65% and called it a bad Street Fighter II clone. Simon argued that the gameplay is virtually the same, the layout is also similar. However, Jaleco have only used 4 of the Super Nintendo 6 buttons, so the number of moves is not equal to Street Fighter II. The final nail in Tuff Nuff's coffin is the difficulty setting. I completed the normal level in my first attempt, and nearly completed the hard setting in a day. Not the challenge you'd expect for this price. Wait until Street Fighter II Turbo. Now, the highest score I could find came from Die Hard Game Fan, who disagreed with SNES Force and gave Tuff Nuff an average score of 90%. The Inquirer loved the game, raving that Jaleco's first Super Nintendo fighting game is truly amazing. The control is what makes this game so good. It's perfect! The graphics are good, but what really makes this game shine are the characters and how easy it is to perform combos. A 16 meg fighting game that needs to be brought to the arcades. GameFan's lowest score came from Sergeant Gamer, who concluded that the moves, animation, and beautiful backgrounds add up to a super surprise from Jaleco. For a company that made its rep on baseball games, they're incredibly adept at making quality fighters. Now, if you come this long and you're wondering what GamePro thought, then you probably won't be too surprised when I tell you that they gave Tuff Nuff a score of 4 out of 5. Hey, at least they're consistent. This game is a fun fighter, sort of a junior Street Fighter 2. You may burn some new blisters with the awesome combos, but with only 4 characters to choose from, this light fighter is too easy for most Street Fighting vets. The sleek action, smooth sprite movement, and detailed backgrounds of this cart may just not be enough. The truth is, Tuff Nuff is a Street Fighter clone that, while fun, is a little bit hard to go back to. There are a lot of little problems that keep this from matching the greats of the franchise. But I still say that it's worth checking out on the Switch. Give it a play, especially if you have some friends over. Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post a new episode every time Nintendo adds an old school game to their service. In fact, we're going to be back next Friday with an episode that not only looks at Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, but also Kirby Superstar, Kirby's Dream Course, and Kirby's Dream Land 3. Yeah, it's going to be a big Kirby marathon next Friday. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite Super NES beat-em-up? Oh boy, there's so many to choose from. I can't wait to see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back next week with more reviews and, of course, Kirby. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,